What's up, y'all? This is Hammer here again, back with another video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the situation in regards to Israel and the Palestinians. I don't know how long this is going to be, but I'm going to try and cover as much as I can. And I'm going to try to give you a quick sort of synopsis of what's going on and to kind of keep you updated. Now, I already made a video in the past in regards to, and the video was called, the Jews and the Arabs are not Black people's problems. The previous video I did covering Israel, essentially was trying to say, hey, look, Black people should not really be focused on the issue. We should stay out of it. And I kind of still stand on that. But what I'm going to be doing today is covering the issue in regards to Israel and how it has evolved ever since I made that video, and why I personally believe how, although Black people globally, have been very hesitant to engage in this issue, why we are sort of seeing more and more Black people in general leaning more towards the Palestinians, which is why I said, could potentially happen within that video. That, Black people then do tend to be more sympathetic towards the Palestinians. But let's just dive into the video, right? So, for those who may not know, recently, the ICJ essentially came out and essentially released a ruling in regards to South Africa's case against Israel. Now, for those who don't know, South Africa essentially brought a case against Israel, and the whole point of the case was them saying that Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians, right? Now, keep in mind that it takes a long time for the ICJ to come to determination in regards to whether or not a genocide is occurring. What South Africa was asking for was for preliminary decision in order to say, hey, we are asking for you to order a ceasefire. Now, keep in mind that, because the ICJ is a part of sort of the international system, what that essentially means is that Israel is bound by international law, right? I believe that what they are essentially the base in which case being brought to is because there was a genocide, I believe, treaty, a genocide convention in which Israel is a party to, and so therefore, because of this, South Africa is able to bring Israel to the ICJ because of that genocide convention, genocide treaty, and essentially charge that Israel is committing genocide, and so just due to the international system, due to the sort of genocide convention / the genocide treaty, Israel is bound to sort of appear before the ICJ and sort of deal with the case. Now, what we have seen is that leading up to the preliminary decision that came out, I believe, yesterday, most people thought that the ICJ was going to essentially get Israel off the hook. That's essentially what that was going to happen, right? However, the ICJ came out and gave a much more nuanced position in which they said that, hey, Israel, we are not going to order a ceasefire, but Israel has to take acts to prevent genocide. Now, in my opinion, and most people said it too, this is a win for South Africa, because although the ICJ did not order a ceasefire, it essentially made it very clear that it believes that there is some credible evidence, credible possibility, it believes that South Africa's claims of genocide do have some sort of credible basis, right? And so this gives the indication that, hey, although it may not have or the ceasefire, the fact that it's telling Israel to take acts to prevent genocide means that it does see it does believe that there are some facts and there is some credibility to the claim that Israel is committing genocide within Gaza and towards the Palestinians, right? Now, in order for you to understand why this ruling matters, you have to understand the history that led us up to here. Number one, Israel essentially began as a white settler state. That's actually what it was, right? It was a white settler state that essentially was established by taking up Palestinian territory, and they have grown and grown throughout the years by doing this. Now, although the Israelis will go and sort of make the argument that, hey, we're pushing for peace, we want peace between the Jews and the Palestinians, the reality comes is that everybody knows, or anyone who's actually really intelligent knows, that Israel's goal was always to take up all of Palestine. But they understood if they came out and said that, there'll be immense geopolitical backlash. So they will always hide behind the two-state solution, or they'll either say that we believe in a two-state solution, or they'll say it's not possible, which is ludicrous because it is possible. They just don't want it. But they'll do all these things to hide the fact that really what they want is everything. They want the Palestinians to go and for them to take the entire territory of Palestine for themselves. And so this has been, in my opinion, the history that has led up, this has been the history of Israel for decades, right? Is that they will increasingly take Palestinian territory, they will increasingly abuse Palestinians, and whenever the international community will go at Israel, the United States and its Western allies would essentially bail Israel out. Right? And it did seem like Israel was going to get away with it because of that protection, right? But one thing I have said is this, right? Look, I've said, look, a lot of time things really only occur because the environment is ripe for it to occur. I've talked about, hey, when it comes to Black Americans, for example, right? Black Americans were really only able to get civil rights because it was a perfect timing. The environment was right. In other words, they've always fought for civil rights, but the reason why it happened specifically after World War II is because America was engaged in the Cold War, and whenever the United States tried to talk about, hey, y'all gotta stop this communism, stop all these things, the Soviet Union, the Chinese would say, hey, you can't talk to us about communism when you guys are literally killing and lynching the Black society. You have no moral authority. And so because the Negro problem was sort of affecting America's image, especially as it was trying to wage a sort of Cold War against the Soviets and its allies, it became now in America's interest and in white people's interest to sort of deal with it to solve the Negro problem. So once the environment became correct, then civil rights could manifest. Because keep this in mind, Black Americans have always fought for the right. It's just that the environment was not right. The environment was not ready for it. That's the reason why every time they tried, they were smacked down. We saw with the bombing of Wall Street, for example, right? Every time they'll try to build some or advance or ask for rights, they'll be smacked down. But because the environment was right after World War II, it allowed civil rights to essentially go through. Now, with that understanding, it explains why, hey, Israel was able to get away with its slow, annexation of Palestinian territory, with a slow genocide of Palestinians, because, Western powers were able to have come out and essentially supported Israel ever since creation. They've always supported Israel. And so whenever Israel got in trouble or essentially was facing international pressure, they could always rely on the United States and its Western allies to bail them out. But this could really only happen because the Western powers were strong within the international system. Right, and even got stronger after the Cold War and the sort of rise of America's unipolar moment and America's hegemonic control over global affairs. However, since we have been seeing the rise of the multipolar order that has been led by China and Russia, this has in many ways put an end to America's unipolar moment and is slowly eroding America's hegemonic control over global affairs, weakening the ability of the West to come and save Israel or bail out Israel from its horrific atrocities and horrific actions, right? And I believe once you understand this, then we can sort of move forward towards the situation that happened on October 7th, in which Hamas came and attacked Israel. Now, traditionally, right, Israel would have been able to say, hey, Hamas, militants, Arabs, blah, and just go and bomb the hell out of Palestinians, and the West would protect them. But because we now understand the sort of changing geopolitical situation in which we're seeing the rise of the sort of multipolar order led by China and Russia, and the decline of the sort of unipolar situation by the sort of unipolar moment of America and the decline of America's hegemonic power and the decline of the Western imperialism and Western hegemony, as we're seeing this is the reason why this time around it was different for Israel. And the world's reaction, specifically in the global south, was different. Now, keep in mind, guys, just to break it down, when people say the global south and the global north, the global south and the global north typically is meant for economic development. So when people say the global south, they refer to countries that are less developed. When they say the global north, they refer to countries that are more developed. But that's not just it, because the global south is also referred to countries that are outside of the Western bloc, right? And the global north is referred to countries that are essentially a part of the Western Bloc, right? This is my opinion is a reason why, for example, Australia is viewed as a part of the global north, but China is viewed as part of the global south. So it's not just about economic development and about how developed you are. It's also a geopolitical term, right? So global south means less developed countries, but it also means countries that are typically viewed as being not a part of the West, and the global north means more developed countries, but it also means countries that are the West. And I believe that now the way it is used, it's really more used in terms of when people say global south, they means the block of countries that are viewed as outside of the West. And when people use global north, they mean countries that are outside. When people use global north, they mean countries that are the West. So global south now really just means countries that are not a part of the West, and global north now just means the West in general. So understanding this, and so once you understand this, and once you understand that, hey, we've been seeing the rise of the multipolar order, we've been seeing a decline of this sort of Western imperialism, Western hegemonic control. This meant that when the October 7th thing happened, the reaction was different, right? Things were different for Israel. We saw the sequence and say, hey, wait a minute. The situation in regards to Hamas attack on October 7th is not just about them being terrorists, right? This plays into a longer history of Israeli occupation in regards to Palestine. And so the global south countries, like countries that are typically that are outside of the world, saying, hey, what up? We got to hold Israel accountable. You have been able to get away from accountability and sort of circumvent international law due to because you've been able to take advantage of the dominant Western power over the global affairs. But now that they're in decline, we, the global south, who are essentially now part of this new multipolar order, are going to hold you accountable. And this is the reason why we've sort of been seeing this difference, right? More and more countries putting pressure on Israel. More and more pro-Palestine. The pressure now that Israel is facing from the international community is very different, right? Like countries are now trying to hold them accountable, and not just that, because of the declining Western power, it is becoming more and more difficult for America and the West to save Israel and defend Israel. And this plays back into why when South Africa brought that case towards the ICJ, it was such a big deal, because it once again shown that, hey, times have changed. The era of Western dominance is over, right? We are now in a new multipolar age, and Israel, you're not going to be able to rely on the West to bail you out anymore. And the fact that South Africa was a part of the BRICS just played more into that reality. How, hey, the era of Western impunity, the era of Israel, getting a pass because of the West coming to support it, is coming to an end, right? And so that's the reason, in my opinion, when the ICJ ruled essentially that, hey, you have to take acts to prevent genocide, that was such a big deal, because once again, this plays into this slow shift of the geopolitical order from the sort of from the West imperialism, Western hegemony towards the rest of the world. So we are no longer going to live under Western hegemony. We're now going to slowly move into a new multipolar system. And I believe that this decision by the ICJ to say, hey, you must take acts for genocide, essentially plays into that. Although they didn't order a ceasefire, it still was a major loss for Israel, because what it meant is that if they're saying that you must prevent acts towards genocide in regards to Palestinians, that means that they believe these allegations have some credibility, and they could potentially find you guilty. Now, with all that being said, the question becomes, okay, now that the ICJ has essentially made a decision, how do I think the West is going to react? Well, here's the thing. The West, specifically Israel, really only has two options. They can either comply or not comply, and either outcome of these things are horrible for the West. If Israel decides to essentially comply, this allows Israel to save face and say, hey, people have accused us of abusing international law, circumventing international law, but hey, here we are essentially complying with the ICJ ruling. We're trying to take acts for genocide, so you guys can't say we're just a quote-unquote rogue state on the international stage. So they're able to save face in that matter. However, what that also means that if the ICJ were to come back and find them guilty, they're not going to be able to turn around and say, oh, well, this decision is illegitimate, we're going to revolt and we're not going to comply. Because once again, if you start off by complying and say, hey, you are a good faith actor, you are going to stick by international law, you're going to comply, then that means that if the ICJ finds you guilty, it's going to be very difficult for you to come back and say, oh, well, since the ruling doesn't favor us, now all of a sudden we're not going to comply anymore. Because if you do that, you will be viewed as a bad faith actor, and all of these narratives about Israel essentially, revolting against international law and not respecting international law will more and more be solidified, and you will be more and more viewed as a rogue state. That, you only comply with international law when it benefits you. When it doesn't benefit you, you want to quote unquote revolt against it, right? So that's the issue they face if they do comply. If they don't comply, all this will do is that it will essentially reinforce a narrative that Israel essentially, once again, is revolting against international law, is operating as a rogue state, and is not abiding by the rules. And not just that, it is being helped by the Western Bloc to do this. Right? And in my opinion, this not only increases the chance that the ICJ will find them guilty of genocide if they revolt against the ICJ ruling and don't comply, but this will further destroy, in my opinion, the credibility of the West. People need to understand, right? Okay, look. People just look. Recently, the United States and the West were going around making these arguments of the rules-based order. And these arguments, in my opinion, became even much more stronger after Russia invaded Ukraine. It was like, hey, we represent a rules-based order. We represent the quote-unquote rules-based system, right? And so we are here to essentially advocate for that. And what they will tell us was like, look, if you allow Russia and China to slowly sort of, put in place this multipolar system, well, this multipolar system is not going to have a rules base. There's no rules. It's going to be might makes right, right? We don't believe in might makes right. We believe in rules, right? This is the argument they're pushing for. Now, here's the thing. Although the rest of the world, specifically the global South, in my opinion, was very skeptical, they bought into the idea of international norms, international rules, right? This is the reason why in the United Nations, so many of those countries, in my opinion, voted with Ukraine, because they believe in the idea of international rules, right? Even though they were skeptical. And you sort of see that, right? Because on one hand, they will go to the United Nations and vote with Ukraine and condemn Russia's invasion, but on the other hand, they did not join the West in sanctioning Russia. And so it showed you how the global South and the rest of the world was essentially conflicted, because on one hand they believe in the international system, they believe in sort of international rule, which is why they voted against Ukraine, but at the same time they were suspicious of America and the West's true intentions, which is the reason why, despite them voting for Ukraine against Russia in the United Nations, they still chose to not sanction Russia, right? So this is the narrative that America was pushing, right? They were going hard against it. They were talking about, we got to fight for the rules. They were calling on all kinds of countries, saying, you got to join us in these sanctions. Why aren't you enforcing? They were going hard against Russia for Ukraine. And so if Israel doesn't comply and it's outright rebelling against international law, and the United States and the West supports them and helps them do this, this will essentially destroy their credibility, because all of the arguments they've been making now about rules-based order, all these things, will essentially be destroyed. Right? Because now China, Russia, and the rest of the world, all of their fears, all of their suspicions will now been realized. Will essentially vindicate. Because once again, they've always been suspicious of the fact that whenever the United States and the West say rules-based order, what they really mean is, we believe in the rules for the West, but not for the rest of the world. And so if Israel rebels against this decision and goes ahead and does whatever the fuck it wants anyway, right? Not only will it reinforce that, hey, Israel's once again rebelling against international law, but it will. But if America and the West supports them, it will destroy any credibility they have, and all of the arguments about the rules-based order will be done. And it will even, in my opinion, reinforce suspicions, and in many cases, vindicate suspicions that America's rules-based system really only applies to the West, right? They only believe in the rules when it benefits the West. But when it comes to the rest of the world, then fuck you. But once again, there are consequences to this, because not only does it accelerate the sort of shift of power, the shift of the globe from the West towards the East, the shift of the globe from the sort of Western dominated system to a more multipolar system. It hurts them even right now, even in the meantime, right? Think about it, for example. You have Houthis that are literally shooting rockets in the Red Sea, and this disrupted international trade. I'm like, the Suez Canal has been affected, with less and less ships passing through there. Right? International trade is being disrupted because the Houthis are essentially disrupting the Red Sea in solidarity with the Palestinians. Right? We look, for example, at Europe, right? Europeans essentially say, hey, we are going to cut ourselves off from Russian energy, and we're going to shift towards energy from the Middle East. But once again, your support for Israel's actions not only is causing the actions of the Houthis, which is disrupting the Red Sea, which is disrupting the sort of international trade, but it risks inflaming the Middle East. And if the Middle East gets inflamed, this will essentially, in many ways, affect your ability to gain energy or get energy from the Middle East as well too. And so if you can't get energy from Russia and you can't get energy from the Middle East, it's going to massively affect your economy in a horrific way. And although you may be able to get energy from other places, it's going to be much more expensive and will make you less competitive on the global stage. So even though the West is standing behind Israel, there are consequences, right? It's accelerating the decline of Western hegemony, of Western imperialism. It's accelerating the rise of the multipolar system led by Russia and China. It's causing a disruption of international trade, specifically as we're seeing the Houthis, shooting rockets in the Red Sea, and how it's disrupting the Suez Canal, right? So it's disrupting international trade. It's further putting more and more economic pressure on Europe as their access to energy from both Russia and the Middle East gets disrupted, right? All of this does not help the West. And yet they are still going full forward supporting Israel, right? And so, in my opinion, when you look at the consequences that the West is dealing with, right, in terms of in terms of the world, in terms of the increasing decline of the West, the increasing rise of the multipolar system, the global trade being disrupted, the sort of economic blowback on the West, specifically Europe and the United States, right? Because America will be affected too. Let's be honest here, this sort of disruption in the Red Sea and disruption of the global trade will affect America too. So when you look at all of these consequences, right, them being discredited, right? Decline of Western hegemony, rise of the multipolar system, the disruption of global trade through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, the economic blowback against Europe and America and the West. When you look at all these consequences, what you ask is, okay, why then is the West supporting Israel despite all these consequences? And I personally believe the reason is very clear, okay? The West views itself within Israel. Number one, Israel is in my opinion, is meant to be an outpost for the West within the Middle East, number one. But also number two, let's be honest here. Israel is a white settler state. It's a European colonial project. It represents European imperialism, right? America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, all of these countries, right? Europe and essentially the sort of West in general, right? They represent these things, right? Canada, Australia, United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand represent white settlerism. They represent sort of European colonialism, right? And then when you look at Europe, Europe represents European imperialism, right? The history of them colonizing the world. So when you look at the West, because the overall collective West represents white settlerism, European colonialism, European imperialism, when they look at Israel, Israel in many ways represents them. Israel is the same thing. Israel also represents white settlerism, European colonialism, and European imperialism. And so because Israel, in my opinion, represents the same things as the collective West, they see themselves in Israel, and that's the reason why they defend Israel despite all of the consequences. Despite all the consequences, right? Because just like the collective West represents white settlerism, European colonialism, and European imperialism, Israel also represents white settlerism, European colonialism, and European imperialism. And that's the reason why they defend Israel and support Israel despite the consequences. And also the fact that Israel essentially operates as an outpost for the West within the Middle East. But once again, all this will do is hurt the West in the long term. It will simply accelerate their decline and accelerate the rise of this sort of multipolar system, the multipolar order, right? And I'm going to give you an example. Mexico and Chile have essentially brought cases towards the ICC, right? Mexico and Chile have brought cases towards the ICC, essentially saying, hey, the ICC needs to investigate the war in Gaza for potential war crimes, right? Now, although this investigation will, in my opinion, also include Hamas and Israel, let's be honest here, Israel is going to end up being the main focus because they're the ones bombing the fuck out of buildings and killing thousands of Palestinians. Right? So this more or less, it puts even more pressure on Israel, especially considering the fact that, hey, if the ICC does go ahead and start investigating the potential war crimes in Gaza at the request of Mexico and Chile, although the investigation will include Hamas and Israel, it will more than likely end up, in my opinion, focusing more on Israel long term because they're the ones causing all destruction. Right, so you have that going on, and you have that hey, Indonesia is also bringing another case towards the ICJ, in which and by the way, this is a complete separate case from South Africa. Indonesia is bringing a separate case to the ICJ, saying that, hey, Israel has been in rebellion against the international law for a very long time due to its occupation of Palestine, right, of Palestinian territory, and how it treats Palestinians, right? So you have all of this going on because, once again, the Western support of Israel is hurting it, right? It's causing immense consequence for the West, and this will hurt the West in the long term. So the more and more you support Israel, the worse it's going to get for the West. The more consequence, the more blowback you will receive in general, right? Now, with all of that being said, right, the question becomes, how do I think things are going to play out, right? In my opinion, when it comes to the West and Israel, if the United States and the Western Bloc keeps supporting Israel, like I said before, they will essentially accelerate the decline of Western hegemony, the decline of the Western order, right, world system, right, and it will accelerate the rise of the multipolar system, led by Russia and China. So those are the consequences, right? And in my opinion, this will essentially put an end to Western hegemony and sort of American unipolar moment and sort of American hegemony permanently. So all you're simply doing by supporting Israel is you are accelerating the decline of the American unipolar moment. You're accelerating the decline of American hegemony. You're accelerating the decline of Western hegemony. You're accelerating the decline of sort of Western dominance and Western power across the world. And on top of that, you are also accelerating the rise of the multipolar system. You're accelerating the rise of the rest of the world, and you're accelerating, the rest of the world, especially the global South, siding more and more towards Russia and China and the multipolar order that they are trying to put in place. So those are the consequences when it comes to America and the West. Now, when it comes to Israel, right? Israel, in my opinion, faces two paths, two options, right? Israel can either push for a two-state solution, or they can keep going down this path of rebellion, which will only lead to their end, in my opinion, right? If Israel goes for a two-state solution, this will help Israel because, once again, it will allow them to leave peacefully with the Palestinians. They will be accepted by the Middle East, and they essentially will be able to finally have their own state and live at peace, right? All of these issues about the Zionism, all that stuff will go away, right? If they have a two-state solution, they'll finally be able to live in peace and, in my opinion, have a peaceful resolution to the Palestinian issue. But if Israel goes down the path of rebellion and keeps rebelling against international law, what will happen is that they will face increasingly more and more pressure, external pressure from the global community, from the international community, specifically from the global South and the rest of the world and the non-Western world. And this increasing external pressure will, in my opinion, increase internal pressure and cause Israel to fracture more and more internally. And with external pressure being applied and internal pressure and the fracturing of Israel internally, this will essentially, in my opinion, lead to the end of Israel as we know it. So those are the two paths that Israel is facing, right? Either you push for the two-state solution and have a peaceful resolution, or you continue your path of rebellion, which will put you in a situation in which you will face both external pressure from the international community and the non-Western world, which will create internal pressure and the sort of fragmenting of the Israeli society and Israel's internal affairs. And with both the external pressure and the internal pressure, this will essentially lead to Israel coming to an end. So you can either choose a two-state solution and leave peacefully and have a peaceful resolution, or essentially revolt against international law, which will essentially create more pressure both externally and internally, which will lead to the end of Israel. Those are the two paths it will take. Now here's the thing. What path do I think Israel will take? Personally, I believe Israel, unfortunately, is going to take the path of essential rebellion. They're going to keep rebelling against the international system. And as they do this, right, they will incur more and more, like before, they will incur more and more external pressure from the rest of the world, right, from the international community, specifically from the global South and the sort of non-Western world, right, against Israel. And as they face more and more of this external pressure from the rest of the world, from the international community, from the global South, from the non-Western forces, from the non-Western groups, this external pressure will, in my opinion, create internal pressure, which will create fracturing within the Israeli society. And with both external pressure from the global community, specifically the non-Western world, and internal pressure within the Israeli community, which is going to fracture Israel. Both the external and the internal pressure together, in my opinion, will lead to the end of Israel. That, in my opinion, is the future. Because I believe that they will choose look, Netanyahu came out and said that he opposes a two-state solution. So that means that all of these arguments that people are making that, Israel supports peace. Because look, Israel has been making, a lot of the people who support Israel, right, a lot of the Zionists have been making arguments for a very, very long time that essentially Israel supports peace. Israel wants to live peacefully with the Palestinians. This has been the argument they're making. But folks, some people say, no, look, Israel has no intention of a solution. Israel wants to essentially wipe out Palestine and take over the Palestinian territories, right? So now that Netanyahu has come out and said this, I love it because now this removes all pretext. So all of the folks who've been defending Zionists, defending Israel, they can no longer come out and gaslight us and say, oh, well, Israel really supports, peace. It's just a Palestinian. No. You can no longer say that Israel supports peace and it's just so-called the Palestinians who cause the problem. Because now that Netanyahu has come out and said he opposes a two-state solution, he's made it very clear that in reality, we were right. It's been the Israelis who never wanted peace. They simply wanted the Palestinians to leave Palestine and for them to take over everything. And so with all this being said, it is clear to me that the path they're going to choose is a path of rebellion. They're going to keep rebelling against international law. And all this will do is, in my opinion, bring them towards a dead end. And this dead end is going to be one in which they're going to face more and more international pressure, right? External pressure from the international community, right? Specifically the non-Western world. And this external pressure will create more internal pressure and will create fracturing within the Israeli society. And with both external pressure and internal pressure together, this will essentially lead to the end of Israel as we know it. So that's, in my opinion, what I think is more likely going to happen. Those are the most likely outcomes for both the West and Israel in general. So with that being said, y'all, I already recorded this video before, but I was tired, so I kind of recorded again. I have to have a much more better analysis. So I hope this video has a much more better analysis. I think really much more detail in general. But with that being said, y'all, I'm gonna leave it there. But look, another thing I also want to add before I close, look, I said before, Black people are, in my opinion, we are conflicted when it comes to this issue. And the reason, because like I said in the previous video in regards to Arabs versus Jews and why Black people should not get involved, is that we have been fucked by both the Arabs and the Europeans, right? When you look at Africa, for example, right? Arabs came through, they colonized North Africa, they came through to East Africa, specifically Somalia, right? Arabs essentially call Black people Abid, right? Which means slaves. So on one hand, the Arabs, have this long history of colonizing Black people, of engaging us, because remember, Arabs also had a slave trade too. So we had to deal with the Arabs and their colonization. And so we have to deal with the history of the Arabs, the colonization, the slave trade, and the fact that they call Abid. And then when it comes to Israel essentially represents these sort of collective white West. And when it comes to the collective white West, we have to deal with the history of European colonization, slavery, and them calling us niggers. So it's like, whether it's the Arabs and the white Jews and the collective whites, Black people, was stuck, because both the Arabs and the Jews essentially have found. So once again, the Jews, in my opinion, are a representation of the white collective. So both the Arabs and the Jews and the white collectives and the white collective have fucked us over. And so that's the reason why I think we've been struggling to pick a side. But I think, in my opinion, what we have seen is that despite this, Black people have genuinely aligned more towards the Palestinians. And the reason, because even though we know that the Arabs are calling us Abid and the Jews and the whites are calling us niggers, we fundamentally understand that, hey, what's happening to the Palestinians, right, is genuinely wrong. What's happening to the Palestinians, essentially, in my opinion, is white settlerism, right? Let's be honest. What they're doing to the Palestinians is not different from what happened to the Congo, what happened to South Africa. So that's the reason why I think, although we have a horrific history, both with the Arabs and the Jews and the whites, Black people in general are still aligning more with the Palestinians, because fundamentally, when we look at what's happened to the Palestinians, we genuinely sympathize with the cause. We genuinely feel like, hey, what's happened to them is wrong, right? In regards to how you feel about the Arabs and how they view Blacks, in regards to how you feel about the Jews and the whites and how they view Blacks, Black people generally have agreed that at the end of the day, with all that being said, you cannot deny the fact that these people are being treated inhumanely. So that's the reason why I think, despite us being sort of stuck in regards to how we approach, despite us being conflicted in regards to the Arabs and the Jews and the whites, Black people generally have aligned more towards Palestinians. But with that being said, yo, I think that that's covered by everything. You guys, some of the chat, what you guys see the video, but yeah, look, I've given you guys the most detailed breakdown of Israel, Palestinians, and what's going on, the geopolitical situation, and I hope that you guys were able to walk away with this being much more informed. Tell me in the chat what you guys think about it. What are you agree or disagree? And I always love to see how people react to my videos and you know how people think about these topics, right? For me, I like covering a variety of video topics on this channel. So this is more of a geopolitical topic. So y'all tell me what you guys think about it. But with that being said, y'all, make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe. Hammer out.